It's so nice to see all of you here today. It's a real landmark for Bridge. Bridge is 30 years old. It started actually in 1986, but had its first sort of trading year in sort of 1987. So what's really nice is we've got some people here who've been right from the beginning in the room. We've got some former chairs. We've got the existing chair. They only seem to do 3 years with me, then they leave. He might stay a bit longer this time. And then we've got trustees as well as some staff. But we've also got people from all over the country. We've got some fascinating and really interesting stories for us to hear. In coming together for today's conference, one of the things that we're trying to do at Bridge is trying to get a real sense of what works well in mental health and well-being. Not necessarily what we think people should have, not necessarily what we think people need, but listening to people and trying to get from them what their experiences tell us so we can make sure the services meet their requirements. For Bridge as a charity, charities I think often forget they're there and they're there forever. If people no longer need us, then we've done some good. Okay, if we've done all the stuff we said we're going to do and used all your money very wisely, then they will need less of us, much less of us, and that is the ultimate aim for charities. So we operate as a charity, but we very much know that sustainability is the key. So yes, we need funding, but if we don't need as much to do what we're going to be doing, we'll give it back. We won't use as much as we need, okay, in the first place. So it's very important that what we are trying to do is promote independence, is promote self-reliance, and to make sure that people, their experience with us is a good one, and they move on to live full and fulfilling lives. That's really it. So I'm trying to be on a sort of crusade to speak plain English about mental health as well, no acronyms. You might hear some through the day, and that's fine. Hopefully the speakers, if they do use them, will explain them, or they may get asked questions about them later. But it's really very, very simple, straightforward stuff. What do we know about mental health and well-being that works for people? And if we know what works for people, our challenge is, what are we going to do with that information, and how are we going to do it? So we have some very interesting contributors and speakers. We have a mixture of presentations. We also have a mixture of films. We have question and answers. It will all become apparent during the day. We even have a break. I mean, really nice. In the interest of your own health and well-being, and standing here and listening to people like me, you probably want a break after about an hour and 15 minutes. So we have got a break as well. So it's all very, very good stuff. Okay, I'm going to talk to you first of all about Bridge, and that does involve a presentation, but most of it will probably be just, that will be up there, and then I'll be able to tell you something interesting about what we do. So I'm about to start. Okay, so Bridge runs a number of services. So again, this conference is about sharing, and I'm just going to share with you the top 6 things that our projects do. TILT is an acronym which I'm going to have to explain. So Richard Tilt in 2000 wrote a report about people with mental health problems, and some of whom were stuck in medium and low secure. And what he said was that people shouldn't be here. They've been here for a long, long time. They should be having rehabilitation in the community. So we've named our project after that landmark report. So we have 18 men whose journey usually starts after offending, going through places like Broadmoor, and then ending up in medium and low secure, and we are their first step into the community. So I'm going to tell you some facts about what we do to indicate there are different ways of doing things based on the evidence of what we know. So hopefully you can read that at the back, but we've tracked every single person from 2003 through to now, and at the last cohort we measured of all of the people, only 5% have reoffended. Only 5%. So the national average in general population for people who leave prison is in the first year, 51% will probably reoffend. Okay, so if you take that model and you apply it to all of the prisoners who are coming through the system and you do some maths, you will end up with billions of pounds. We are one of the only non-registered services in the country doing this work. That means we're not, in my terms, a care home, okay? So we don't have all of the CQC stuff, and whatever your views are about CQC and the regulation that they provide, we aren't regulated by them, but we produce this result. So we move people on at a rate of 25% year on year. The average length of stay is 18 months. That's slightly higher than it used to be. It used to be 15 and a half months, but actually people coming through the system have got more problems. They've got more associated drug and alcohol problems than we've ever seen before, and they're a bit younger as well. So we had been moving them on at 15 months, a rate of 15 and a half, but now it's 18 months. But that's still 18 months. And then they move on to, largely speaking, independence. Some of them will need to have a couple of hours a week of support, but mainly speaking, independence. So this is an interesting one. When people are arrested, a number of things take place. They are weighed, and then they go through the prison system and medium support, and they put on a lot of weight, and they get diabetes, and they have all these other problems. The system really doesn't do much for them, and it doesn't rehabilitate them too well either. So we've looked at that and we thought, what could we actually do? And so we measured them when they leave Tilt, and the finding is, for the people in the last year, they are the same weight as when leaving us than when they were arrested. So that's actually quite good. They've sort of plummeted, and I think people who've been through the system know that that's actually a good result. 75% of people move on to independence or less support. And the last time we measured this, 50% moved on to medium support and 25% moved on to independence, but 25% did go back to hospital. Okay, so, and it's probably difficult to reoffend if you're in hospital, so it does have a little bit of an effect on the reoffending rate, so just to be honest about that. We also run flexible community support, and basically we will give you from between 1 and 20 hours per week, depending on what you need. We're oversubscribed. We see more people than we actually are funded to see, but we do see more people because we think it's important not to sort of, say no to people who are really in need. Year on year, 29% of people move on to needing no support. So for those of you in the room who know about mental health services in the community, a lot of charities, there is a price tag associated with every person who you are funded for. And if you hold on to those people for 5 years, you will get funded for that rate for 5 years. We're not interested in that. If people need to move on, they should move on because there's a queue of people waiting. So services shouldn't hold on to people. They should move them on where they can. If they need to re-enter and have a little bit of support, they should also have that support. But our experience and evidence shows that when you give people a little bit of support to help them in their daily lives, there is less movement back into greater support when they have a crisis, and that's fundamental for us. Of the cohort that we see, which is currently about 100 people, there's reduced support to a further 14%. So people go from, if they needed 4 hours, down to 1 hour. So in total, over every year, we see about 43% of people needing less of us. That is the result we are getting. We use the Recovery Star to measure how people feel about the service they're getting, and that's based on asking them about parts of their life and then rating it between 1 and 10. On average, people score about 2-point improvement every year, which indicates they're moving to a greater level of resilience. And in this particular service, in total, over 2 years, 75% will move on to full independence. However, we're constantly measuring our services to show what the barriers are to people moving on. And often the barriers are, you won't be surprised to know, some associated drug and alcohol problems, family issues, dual diagnosis. There are other things that hold people back. So today is about moving from Bridge Mental Health, which does what it says on the tin, but actually moving it to something called Bridge Support, because actually, do you know what, we just do a whole load of other stuff, and actually people are whole people. They're not just a product of their diagnosis, they are a person. Medium support is one of the things which is one down from 24-hour, but up from flexible support. That's not full up, because it's quite a new model and we're not sure whether people need 9 o'clock till 9 o'clock at night with on-call or whether they need a different kind of service. But it's not full up totally at the moment, but it has some very good results. Over every year, 28% of people move on. However, for a charity, I just want to show you the dangers of not being full up when you're providing a really great service. We've measured this over a 16-month period, and we calculated that by people not being in this service and being occupied in homes that we have, it costs us about £100,000 a year. So actually in pressures in terms of a smaller charity, that's quite important. We find that often people don't refer to our service very well because they don't understand it. And those are things that since December 2014 we're trying to put right. Again, we have a similar recovery star average improvement. But again, over time, in the fullness of time, 55% of people move on to full independence. Now, again, when we took these services on a couple of years ago, we came across a group of people who've been sitting there for 5 years with the same support and the same thing going on in their lives. That just can't be right. The weird thing was our move-on rates in the first year looked really good because a load of people didn't need any support. They'd just been sitting there kind of waiting for a support worker to turn up. That no longer happens. This borough has become very good at solving those problems. However, our number one barrier to people moving on in their lives is poor motivation and engagement. So, as we're going to hopefully hear later on, there are ways of engaging people, there are ways of motivating people which go beyond having loads of nurses around you or, you know, sort of models that we think we know about. Actually, when we talk to people about what will help them, we put that in place and then that helps people move on. It's very straightforward. It's nothing about what I'm going to be saying is very, very difficult to sort of, you know, implement or understand, really. So, in an enlightened piece of commissioning, I could say all of people who commission us are enlightened, obviously, and anyone who's in the room who'd like to do that will be similarly enlightened. The local CCG gave us a sum of money 3 years ago to run a recovery college. Now, the NHS normally runs recovery colleges. In fact, virtually every other area that has a recovery college is run by the NHS, in NHS grounds. My experience is, and what people tell us, to get well doesn't necessarily mean being in hospital. And if you want to be on a road to recovery, going back through the hospital gates might not be the best thing for you in the long term. So we took the NHS label, if you like, off that. Not to say that we don't use the NHS to deliver stuff in the college. We do. They do stuff that we don't do. None of us, I'm not a clinician, pretty much none of my staff are clinicians. We do other stuff, but we work with some fantastic clinicians to do their brilliant stuff. As I say, an enlightened piece of commissioning, they gave us the money and they kind of gave us a bit of a blank piece of paper. So we decided to just go and ask people what they wanted as opposed to us tell them what they should have. So we have over 1,000 students enrolled from day one. That is so much higher than all of the other recovery colleges. I just think it's in the middle of Woolwich. People walk through the doors from all walks of life and all different kinds of presentations, if you like. Mostly people with severe and enduring mental health problems, actually. And most of them are walking through because they don't want to go elsewhere. They don't want to go to the GP. They don't want to go to A&E. And that's natural and obvious that that should be, you know, there should be an alternative. And so we treat them sort of as, you know, on spec as people who walk through the door, and we try and work with them as they turn up. And as a result of working with us, various sort of figures involved in those three, I've amalgamated, and 47% sounds great, actually, that in employment, training and education, actually the employment number is much smaller than it would be for anything else, and we'd like to improve that. But people come in and then they want to have some skills to help them manage their own condition. That's basically it. And once they do that, the first step is getting involved in something, and then they either go on to college or other education, or a lot of people go and get jobs. 60% of people who in the college walk through the door and refer themselves. The rest pretty much is Oxleys in this borough, which is good. But about 60% walk through the door and say, I need something. Is there something you can do? And more often than not, we can. We have 28 partner agencies delivering courses. So my kind of plea is that we kind of join things up. We're not the experts in everything. So we're not clinicians. We need the best people delivering. What we're good at is bringing it all together. So if we were going to go and do this in another part of the country, we'd just go and get the best people in that part of the country, bring them all together and say, drop your ego and just produce the best stuff. Really simple message, but it's very, very doable. So the cost of a student per week as GU means Greenwich University, by the way. So I'm not just saying this and pulling it out of the air. Greenwich University have done a piece of work looking at what we do. So it costs £14 per student per week. Does anyone know how much it costs for a night in hospital if you have a sort of crisis for one night? About £500, yeah. Probably before you've seen anyone, actually. £14 a week. And of those people, 7% of people getting sort of something meaningful to do. I hope you're getting the idea. It's kind of simple, but it's quite sort of powerful stuff. And so we have done some cost analysis because there is some sort of real bottom line effect of what we do. Greenwich University looked at a sample of 300 students attending the Recovery College, and across primary, social and tertiary care, that is, substance misuse, physical health and social care, the total saving to this local health population per 300 students was £437,000. So that has been assessed. Now, we've seen over 1,000 students, so you can just do the maths, really. So for the total of funding us, the total of what it costs, the total effect that it has a very powerful effect. So we've come to the position of saying we need to offer this sort of stuff to the wider community, and our first start is to offer this to offer some of our services to employers. So Bridge have become the first small to medium-sized enterprise to get the London Healthy Workplace Charter Excellence Award, the top award for this particular sort of award. And we've decided to go out and try and implement some of the things we know with local employers. So we're now offering a mental health first aid package which employers can purchase off Bridge. So I'm now going to show you a quick film which illustrates just 90 seconds about what mental health first aid is to Bridge and how we do that.
Bridge Mental Health provides practical day-to-day support for people across London with mental health problems. 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem, but all of us will be touched by it at some point in our lives. Last year, mental ill health cost UK businesses an estimated £26 billion. This means that an average-sized business can expect to lose £1,000 every year. We're all able to recognise when someone has a physical health problem, but most of us will not be able to recognise when someone is experiencing a mental health problem. At Bridge Mental Health, we see the solution as mental health first aid. We will train people in how to spot the early signs of a mental illness, feel confident talking about it, and provide practical support on a first aid basis. This could also mean saving a life. We will be able to dramatically increase the number of people who will be trained in mental health first aid. If we train 1,000 people in the first year, we can deliver a saving of up to £1 million. Our goal is to train one person in every business in Greenwich, to make mental health as important as physical health, and to challenge the idea that you can't treat what you can't see. We can save lives and save money.
Okay, it's a short film. Hopefully that explains something about it. One of the interesting things to tell you about that film, when we went and filmed around Greenwich, we had a range of name badges which described a condition. And so we asked everyone if they wanted to take part, would they choose a name badge? And everyone chose a name badge that was personal to them, and they wore that around the filming. It was really powerful, and everyone chose something different based on their experience, both themselves but of loved ones and people they knew. And we had great participation, and everyone was really interested. So now we're able to actually do this. It's quite exciting. So we're hoping to make a real difference in the lives of also employees and employers in the borough. So I'm just going to leave you with another top 6. I seem to be fond of top 6. It was 5 last year, but I seem to have added them on. And I've actually added one onto that as well. So, because I just thought there's probably more than 6, but so we actually measure our services. I know loads of charities say this. So if you want to know, how much money is being spent of your £1 that you give, or that the borough give to you, or we can tell you all of that. But what does it actually do? And part of what it actually does is sort of really change people's lives and makes them more resilient and more independent. But I'm just going to tell you what actually, in real terms, layman's terms, really does that. We think that people having a sense of purpose, actually a job is ideal, keeps people well. Might not be well for all the time, but actually that is one of the number one things. Unfortunately, one of the speakers who's due to speak today, Sarah, who's going to talk to you about the large-scale study, the happiness Professor Layard study, they used to say that was actually a job was probably primary. They're now saying that mental health is almost as important, or if not more important, as a consideration for keeping people. You've got to attend to mental health and well-being to enable people to be purposeful in their lives. So the people that we work with need a sense of purpose, and when we give them that, and when we give them involvement in, choosing what they want to do, that happens. This is really important. People need to have someone who cares about them and listens to them. It sounds really simple, but there's often so many complaints about other services, whether it be, NHS services, charity services. They never spend enough time, they don't listen, I'm not sure that they even know who I am. All that we tell our staff is that if you get the one-to-one relationship between you and the person in front of you right, if you listen and if you actually do care about what you're doing, the rest is okay, the rest will be fine, because the results will happen. Being active, so as I say, part of wellbeing is being active. So one of the biggest challenges with our services is getting people physically active. But it also means being active in your community as well. It means being active in your networks of friends or friends and family. And I said this earlier on, but being treated as a person, not a diagnosis. We're really working successfully with you now. Your schizophrenia is under control. Bye. No. I mean, actually, if your housing's crap and don't have any money, or you're poor and you're destitute, your schizophrenia could be fine, but you're still not going to have a very nice life. So actually, we're going to help you with all of those things, rather than just see the diagnosis that is sort of you've got the label of. To keep learning, so we're trying to encourage people that actually, I always say the thing that keeps me going is intellectual curiosity. Just being interested in stuff is a good marker, I think, as if you're mentally healthy. And certainly to keep people learning is a key thing in keeping them healthy going into the future. And last but not least, this is a real plea. A little support regularly often prevents big stuff happening later. All right, so if you want to get one of our support workers, and let's say arbitrarily they cost 20 quid, and you want us, and you have to have that for a year because you need help paying your bills, opening your mail, making sure you attend appointments, all of that stuff. Just 1 hour a week, that'll cost 52 times 20. Okay, we've already had 1 night in hospital at least, by baseline 500 quid. 2 months, do the maths, it's ridiculous. There's been large-scale studies, evidential studies, that when you actually support people in small ways, small packages, you actually affect re-entry back into the hospital system at a huge rate. The British Red Cross have done this. There was a study quoted to me the other day, but British Red Cross did a study where people with hip operations, old people, they separated them into half. Half got a 1 hour visit a week. Nothing in particular. How are you? How are you doing? The other half, nothing. Guess what happened? The people who hadn't been visited went back into hospital frequently, far more frequently than the people who'd been visited. It's fairly obvious stuff, really, for us. And the last thing before I finish is part of today. We know actually a lot about what works well. We're going to hear it from the speakers here who can bring some of their own experience and some of the data. The trouble is that actually it's not really happening very fast. So my plea is that from today, we try and look at the evidence and try and all of us try and put that into practice. So that's all for me. There's a bit of asking questions at the end, and if you can sort of hold those questions to the end, which I'll be involved with. I'm going to be introducing people. You've got some question and answer sessions with them, and then as we go through the day, if there's anything else that occurs to you, there'll be space for you to ask. We've got 2 presentations before the first break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish the day. So it's a real pleasure to introduce to you the first speaker, Rachel Kelly, who's a real inspiration, a writer, a journalist and an author. And I'd just like to welcome Rachel to the stage. Thank you very much.